From Moment to Movement with Tamara Banks has been made possible through the generous support of the Anchor Point Foundation, helping nonprofit organizations and leaders creatively solve problems in their communities around the world.
Racism is steeped into the very core of this country, and now, in 2020, Black voices are tired of being ignored, muffled, and killed. Millions of Americans are demonstrating, protesting, to make their voices heard, especially Black Americans. A movement has to arise from the ashes of the moment. From Moment to Movement is a series of one-on-one truth-telling conversations with the Black community, aimed at working towards addressing police brutality and changing systemic racism.
Our guest today is Roderrick Davis, artist from Brunswick, Georgia. Roderrick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Hey, listen, as I mentioned, you are from Brunswick, Georgia, where Ahmaud Arbury lived. And I first want to talk to you about what you were doing when you first heard the news about Ahmaud being chased down in the neighborhood there by two off-duty white officers.
Well, originally when the story was first reported, it wasn't reported in the way that it should have been reported. So at first, when the story was reported, it was looked over. But then a couple of weeks later, I was just laying in bed, and I had got tagged in a Facebook post by a friend of mine, and basically it was an editorial, and he was requesting that that they like re-report the story. Because he pointed out a lot of things that wasn't reported properly. And honestly, when I like found out about it, like my heart sunk, because I was like it was kind of in like disbelief, like nah, this can't be real. You know what I'm saying? So it took some time to let it sink in, but ultimately my reaction was the same basically a couple of months later when the video actually came out and we was actually able to see what had happened. Honestly, when I first saw that video, I was in tears because I immediately, like, my worst is basically like your worst fear. You know what I'm saying? Your worst fear is like okay, like this is really happening. And so my next thought was, okay, well, what's next? So yeah, I was distraught. I was lost for words. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do, and I wasn't sure what we was going to do as a city, to be honest with you. Because like I said, this is a small town. So one of my fears was that this story was going to get swept under the rug and wasn't nobody going to hear about this story. Because as you can see, these guys was able to go for a couple of months walking around freely and not getting, like, without being arrested. So,
Right. This happened in February, and it wasn't until May that it came to light on a more public, broad sphere. And as you said, Brunswick is about 16, I think around 17,000 people. So it would have been easy to let this be buried.
yes.
So I'm sure that was a fear too, that to be re-traumatized, the community traumatized again, because there's no justice, no prosecution, or at least an investigation.
Exactly. And it thankfully, the city came together. Matter of fact, that same day when that video came out, all I seen was Facebook, like on my timeline on Facebook, is people going live in front of like Satilla Shores, which is where the shooting happened, everybody got together, did a whole protest that same day. The same day the video came out, they all came out and flooded the neighborhood. And it was like, we're not going to stand for this. And sooner or later, you know, I started to see people, you know, celebrities, you know, started to retweet and started to repost the story. So it thankfully, it was the people like in the city, like of just being outraged and having like, you know, being fed up with everything, you know, with this. They end up tagging people. They end up tagging everybody they can. I was tagging people, you know, just as much as I can, you know, and thankfully we was able to get, you know, this story out there.
So now to talk about your art, it's extraordinarily beautiful. We can see it there in the shop behind you. Sometimes these incidents like this, a crisis or a traumatic situation happens, and creatives in particular, but not all, just only creatives, but often folks get motivated to sort of do something with their artwork or their music. Talk to me about how Ahmaud Arbery's killing inspired you to paint some things that maybe you hadn't painted before.
Yeah, well, to those who may not know, I also go by art and hip hop. My art is influenced by the culture of hip hop and by the stories of those that I grew up with and just from Black culture. So Black art and just painting our story and our struggles have always been my thing. So hearing this story, you know, just being one who was always driven by, you know, stories like Trayvon Martin and stories like Mike Brown. When I heard this story had happened, like this had happened in my city, where I practically grew up in, and where I call a city that I call home, it was almost like inevitable that I was going to do something. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew like I had to put this in my art. You know, I had to, because I've been speaking like for so long. I've been speaking about trauma. Like my last art show that I did in Brunswick was about trauma, was about Blacks overcoming trauma and the things that have happened to us. So it almost felt unreal that later, 6 months after just at my show talking about like trauma and overcoming, you know, tragedy and stuff like that in the Black community, that this tragedy happened.
Right. And I know that we'll get a shot of it a little bit later, but I know you have this beautiful painting of a mother crying. In the background are some red and blue emergency lights. Tell us what that's about.
Well, originally when I went out to the protest, and I seen I'll tell you the story about how that picture came together. So I ain't gonna lie, I'm mad depressed during this time. Like I'm like, oh my God, like I don't know, like there was a period of time where I didn't even know, like I wanted to do something, I wanted to paint, like I was just depressed. I couldn't paint anything. You know what I'm saying? Just because like my mind state, I wasn't in the right place. So I'm riding through the protest, and I had missed the protest, but I saw everybody was leaving. And as I'm leaving, like I passed through and I see Ahmaud's mom. And she's being consoled by, I don't know who it was, like a family member or something like that. And I like, that's the first thing that came to my mind was like, you know what? We always like everybody's right now, everybody's going home to their siblings, their sons, their fathers. But you know, Miss Wanda, she's not going back home to her son.
You are a little bit younger than Ahmaud. What is your but it's basically in the same age group. What does your mom say to you when you leave the house?
It's crazy because my mother is very overprotective, like very extremely protective. So you know, just seeing this story, like like she watches the news. Like if there's anybody that like that's more woke and more conscious to what's going on, it's my mother. So, obviously she sees all this stuff and she's like, yo, you got to be careful. Like, I don't even know if I want you to like be going on the island. Like, so it's she doesn't like me going out, just going out at night. You know what I'm saying? She doesn't like me doing really any of that stuff because, she doesn't want to become one of those mothers that have to read about her baby boy, or her son, in the headlines, being taken by a neighborhood watchman or some police, so it's a little paranoia there, to be honest with you. There's a little paranoia there, not just even with my mom, like even with my dad, that's another thing. Like, we try our best to love each other and pray for each other, because it's uncertain, it's uncertainty right now. You don't know rather you leave the house, you're going to come back. I'm pretty sure Ahmaud, when he left his house, he had full intentions on coming back. I'm pretty sure his mother, when last time she saw him, she had full intentions that she was going to see her son again. So yeah, it's paranoia there.
Right. I can certainly understand that. And I think I'd be the same if I were a parent.
Yeah.
Roderrick, as we wrap up here, I just want to give you the opportunity to say what you think needs to be said, even if it's already been said before. Right now, anyway, the Black community has the platform. We've got the mic. What would you like to say to white America during this moment in time?
Right now, we are in a very emotional time. Emotions are running high right now. I want to say this to both. First to white America and then to Black America. To white America, I would say that we need your help. If there's anything you can do, even if it's just by lending your voice, monetary, like anything, you can be a help. Don't feel like, you have no power, or this isn't your say just because, you're white. You're just as much as part of this as we are. Because at the end of the day, I don't look at it as a Black or white issue. I look at as a human issue, what we're going through right now. So any way you can, you have to use the privilege that you have as being a white man to try to combat, injustice and that may be going on around you. So if you see something, speak up about it. Don't be afraid to speak up about it. Don't be afraid to take action about it, especially if it's being happening. If it, there's a wrong being going on. You got to start looking at this as if it was your son or if it was your daughter or whatever. You have to do everything you can to combat it. And one thing I would say to Black America, and especially Black youth, is don't feel like your voice doesn't matter. Your voice matters just as much as everybody else's voice matters. I know, like, being young, sometimes you may feel unequipped. I'm still learning a lot, but in my process of like still learning, I'm not afraid to speak out and speak what's on my mind and speak what's on my heart. I don't feel just because I'm young, like I can't make change, or I can't influence change. It's just like Tupac said, I might not be the one to change the world, but I might be the one that plant a seed in the mind of somebody else who will.
Right. Great. Roderrick Davis, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom and your beautiful art. I can't wait to see more of it as you continue to develop. You stay safe out there.
You too. Thank you for having me.
You bet. And thank you, everyone in the audience there, for watching and tuning in. If you want to learn more about From Moment to Movement, just go to pbs12.org. I'm Tamara Banks, and we'll see you next time.
From Moment to Movement with Tamara Banks has been made possible through the generous support of the Anchor Point Foundation, helping nonprofit organizations and leaders creatively solve problems in their communities around the world.